Okay, here we are in Carrara, so let's find Woodlands, which is under Landscapes. We're in the Scenes tab, Landscapes, Dartanbeck, and from there we're not hard to find. Alright, let's start with the Realistic Sky category, where we have 30 presets from the very base scene to these final four, which keep everything a little bit further away from the camera. What these are is they're called panoramic makers. What it is each one of these scenes includes a spherical camera, just in case you'd like to shoot a 360-degree background image that you can then place within the background map area. And if you know how to make HDRI, you can always resource that at the forum at DAZ3D and find out how to make HDRI. It's not that difficult, but yet, of course, like anything else, the more involved you get, the better results you'll get. You can also purchase some nice HDRI images at DAZ. But if you create your own spherical maps and inject them into here, you'll get a nice 360-degree background without having anything else in your scene, which can really help on resources and things. I've used this kit right here and created some background images and made some more presets that use them, and those are right here. Okay, so let's focus on the Realistic Sky for now, because that's where it all begins. As a matter of fact, we're going to start with this particular base scene so that we can go through everything that's in this is in the rest of them. Okay, so starting at the top, we have some useful information. If you find that it's not that useful and you don't need it, feel free to just get rid of it, of course. I use these information files also as a 0-point marker. While we're talking about that, I'd like to point out that right now, if I were to dolly around in this camera just a little bit, I've just added a dolly movement from my camera onto my undo buffer. And okay, now it's empty because it says can't undo. Your undo buffer you need to save when you're building scenes. You're constantly moving things around. You need your camera to be free, to be able to look from different angles at things, back up and move them around. You know, you need to be able to grab your tools. So right off the bat, it's a good habit to get yourself into your director's camera, and then you can always from there set your position to any of the camera angles that you have saved. Okay, now if I move around, there's no undo, okay, because it can't get logged, it can't get animated. Your director's camera only exists in this one spot. You can't find it anywhere. It just does not exist. Okay, so in a nutshell, get to your director's camera right away. Carrara 8.5 now, if you save within the director's camera, you'll start out in the director's camera. This is 8.1 and doesn't have that, so I really enjoy that new feature that they've added. So let's take a moment and talk about the illumination, the lighting aspect of this whole kit. And since we're going to head to the render room now, I'm going to go ahead and hit Control R, which will initiate a render, and that way I can get to the render room without clicking this little button up here. But first, I just wanted to make note that you probably noticed this artificial global illumination here. Most people like to use an artificial global illumination rather than, now I'm going to click Control R, rather than the global illumination that comes built in to Carrara. Studies have shown over the past that using a light rig rather than the global illumination can speed things up. I have certainly seen where such a thing can also be slower than simply using this. So please take some time someday to just try this out at its default settings, and then go ahead and play around with some of this. There's a lot to choose from. It's a very robust system, and it works really well. What it does, both artificial and this global illumination system, it's intended to help smoothen out shadows, make them become not as black as they would if all we used is a single source or even a 3-point source. And global illumination will, whether it's artificial or this, will help diminish that somewhat. Now we're looking along this cliff edge here, and we're still getting nice shadows. It doesn't take away shadows, but it makes them so they're not as black. And believe me when I say that you would notice a big difference if that wasn't there. But this is our base scene in a nutshell. I went through great lengths to make this little piece of terrain. It may not appear like it took that much work, but it's not that easy to make something flat in the terrain editor, whether you're using a map or not. And I did. And why flat? Well, because I use DAS content constantly. That's what I do. We have such great artists up there, and reasonable prices. I would far rather spend the $20 or even, I'm a Platinum Club member, so $1.99 on this brand new thing, and with a flat area here, I can plunk in a fantasy castle, or what I've really been having fun with is Jack Tomlin's GIS series. It's sci-fi stuff, and you can drag it out here in the nature, and it looks really neat. Maybe I'll do that in this series and show you what that looks like. But for now, I just wanted to go over the global illumination thing, because this right here is a distant light that is replicated. We'll take a look at our Cloud Dome setup camera through our Cloud Dome camera, and here are the 88 distant lights surrounding the terrain. Distant lights, it doesn't matter where they're positioned, they are infinite. And so if you put something way out here, the light is still going to come from the other side of them, okay? And the reason that I put this globe out here is, for one, to get the lights out of your way when you're building a scene, and for another, it gives a good distribution of angles. If you increase it above 88 to say double that, 176, you are going to have a lot smoother shadows. Okay, because by jumping up to 88 lights in here, we don't have to enable soft shadows, because we have 88 lights. They're at brightness 1, and the reason for that is we want to help the sunlight. We don't want to replace the sunlight. The sunlight determines our main direction of light, which right now it's pretty much noon. Okay, so we have the dome. The only thing inside of that is some notes, kind of explaining what I just explained, and then this is the replicator that sends the lights onto that dome. Okay, now to further our efforts at creating an underside light, okay, and this is light being reflected off of the ground, or whatever surface it may be. I've included an ambient light rig, and this is kind of a special unit. It actually only, by default in any of the presets, although there are 9 lights here, only 3 of them are ever on at one time. And I believe there's even a night scene that doesn't use the high version at all. But by default in this base setup, I have, I'll back up a second here. We've got high, medium, and low, each of which have a cool, warm, and neutral light inside of them. Okay. High is set at a brightness of 15 for each of the 3 colors. Medium is 5 brightness, and low is a brightness of 3. Okay, and this base scene starts with a high of neutral, a medium warm, and a low in cool. So we've got a representation of all 3 colors. Each of them are very unsaturated. I like to keep a little bit more to the unsaturated side than the saturated. You can change that around to your taste all you want. As a matter of fact, you know, in certain situations, fantasy scenes or sci-fi or whatever, what have you, you may want to increase these or saturate out the color. You know, bring this way off and make it red or pink or you know, whatever you want to do. It's here for you to use. I was going for a more realistic look, so there again, I use this to try and match up as best I feel would work. I've spent my whole childhood growing up in a woods environment. I was raised on 40 acres of preserved wildlife land. And okay, so that's the ambient rig inside of itself. Now I'm in the director's camera, so I'm going to type 0, which will zoom in and center on whatever I have selected. And what I have selected is the ambience direction control. And I used to have a little vertex object in the shape of an arrow, but that adds vertices to the scene, and I decided not to do that. Instead, just use a light instead. It's a distant light with a brightness of 0, and it is set to shine at nothing except for the text inside of it that says this light is only used as a visual indicator. Set visibility on lights below for ambience. Okay, that was a nice brief way of explaining it. And then I felt that might not be enough, so I put ambience information right here for you, just in case you decide that you'd like to read more about the rig. Okay, but basically this direction control shows you which way the high category is facing. It's actually coming up and into this direction. So right now, this bottom corner right on this side of this light, if this was something we could illuminate, this is where the light is coming in from. Okay, and then the medium and low come in from either side of that. And then you have the scene ambient brightness control fulfilling the rest and including that. So this is a highlight. This ambience rig is a highlight to the rest of the atmospheric controls. Okay, so that's our artificial global illumination in a nutshell. Proceeding on with environmental controls, we have this cloud setup. Okay, and here I have some detailed information about what's going on, but let's take a closer look. This partial cloud dome, one is called master, the other is called duplicate, and the reason behind that is I wanted to demonstrate the power of duplicating in Carrara. So each preset comes with these two, even though only one of them is actually considered a mesh, and then an asset, a set of assets. This is just an image of data, and so if I want this to separate from this, I would have to tell it to do so. All I have to do is change a morph within this partial cloud dome. If I select that, let's get ourselves a little more real estate here. Okay, and right now Storm Clouds 2 is maxed out. If we crank that off, look at that. Okay, if I select create new master, what'll happen is, I'm going to cancel that. If I select create new master, what'll happen is this one will no longer be attached to this one. Right now, this image relies on this one staying the same. Okay, and this one relies on this one staying the same. It's one image of what actually is contained within your memory, or the scene memory. So it's a very low cost way to add a lot more to your scene. I use that a lot more in plants. We'll get more into that in more detail as the time comes. For now, let's take it from the beginning and work our way out. So right here it says clouds, make this visible for ground fog. I wrote that on there to try and make it as simple as possible. You can leave this whole thing collapsed, and all you have to do is turn that on. And now let's do a quick render. Control R, and what we've just done is made the only thing we made visible in that entire rig are the two main volumetric clouds. There's the main one that's coming through this terrain, and then there's another one that's planted down below here. And you see it's not adding a whole lot, but it is. It's helping out this atmospheric fog come closer to us. And if you rotate around, you'll see as you render things that we do have fog in here, and it'll be a little bit more dense in one spot and it'll clear up in another. The volumetric clouds make a beautiful fog. When you're this close to a volumetric cloud, it's amazing how well they work, even though they really look fantastic at a distance. But we don't have to wait for all that. Let's head back and continue on with this, because now at this point, Cloud Replicator for Film Cam 1. Right now we're facing Film Cam 1. So if we select this one, and this is all explained in here. There's ground fog information and cloud dome information, and it'll tell you what to do. But I'm going to tell you, so you don't even have to read that if you don't want to. Turn on the replicator's visibility, and all of a sudden we see clouds. We're going to do a quick render of that, and what those clouds are replicated onto is a slice of a globe that I've modeled morphs onto. And by default, Storm Clouds 2 is cranked wide open, and what that does is it'll consolidate more of the clouds down lower. There'll still be some up overhead because we need some of them to help block that sunlight. When it's cloudy out, it's not quite as bright out, but with our global illumination system on, we're still going to get some light, and if we're getting too much light from stuff that can possibly ignore clouds or go through them, then we may have to make adjustments from there if we just don't like what's going on. But right now we should have a ground fog and some volumetric clouds, and so you're getting the gist of that. I'm going to go ahead and stop that and continue on. Now the reason that I did it this way is rather than populating the entire sky with a whole bunch of clouds, I wanted to be more specific as to where I placed my clouds, yet I wanted to use the power of a replicator. But then I was also thinking of other people, and when it comes to a preset type of a thing like this, maybe it's not such a great thing to put in 300 clouds that, 7 of which are going to be coming into view of the camera. So instead of doing all of that, let's take a click into Cloud Dome Setup, and now we're seeing how many clouds are on there now. It looks a little confusing because the cloud is so large. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the visibility of the replicator, and right here we can see the initially placed volumetric cloud. The secondary one that has been duplicated is down below. It's right within reach. You can grab him up and use him if you just want a solitary cloud. I'll go ahead and undo that right now. And what I want to do while I'm in this camera is show you this dome that I was talking about. We'll make it visible, and this is what Storm Cloud 2 morph looks like. I'll use the director camera instead, just so I don't have all of these undo to contend with. So we'll go into shape control, and I'm going to get rid of that morph so that you can see what the thing looks like without the morphs applied. And again, it's going to ask me if I want to create a new master or edit the master. So now that just happened to this one, even though we can't see it. It's turned off. But it's just a slice of a globe. And if you want even fewer clouds, that's where these morphs come in handy. We have lower overhead, and that can actually come all the way down to where it's pushing a cloud right up to the terrain. Okay, if you want it even to sink more, you can just grab this and pull it down. I'm going to undo that, and that, and that, and that. Okay, let's go back into shape control. Now that I'm re-entering shape control, I'm going to have to answer that question again. I can obliterate the need for answering that question by deleting this one if I'm not going to use it, or by creating a new master. If I do create a new master and don't make a duplicate of that master, then I'll no longer have to answer that question. But we're going to have to answer the question. Let's move on to expand all. And we'll edit the master. And expand all makes it really big. That's an easy way to get more clouds into your dome if... oh, now I'm going to have to answer the question again. But if this isn't enough clouds for you, if that's not dense enough for you, then you can simply... Where am I here? Sorry. Then you can just simply use the expand all morph to make it really big, and that way you can go into your replicator and just hit shuffle, and you'll automatically get more clouds added onto that thing. Okay, because it's bigger, it gives it more space, and then you shrink it back down with the more clouds on there, and your surface replicator isn't going to obliterate those clouds that it just added. It's going to keep them right where they were on this mesh, and the whole thing will shrink. That's where this whole morphing system works really good for animations. Is you can start like this, and then move your timeline and bring it in like that, where all I did was hit the undo on that. So now I'm going to have to answer the question again. And this time we'll go with Storm Clouds 1. And bam, I have just made a really cool animation with my clouds. And if you look at this from the side, what happens is it brings all of these clouds down into here, and it darkens this whole horizon for you and adds all of that the spindly clouds in there. It makes it really an effective, cool looking animation. But what did we do last? We did expand all. Now there's the opposite of that, which is shrink all. And starting small with this slider is good. If you crank it all the way, it turns really small. The reason I did that is you never know. You might want to use this partial dome for something else. You can copy and paste it, or you would want to copy and paste it if you're going to do something entirely different like this, and then just erase the clouds off of it. And you can use this to replicate other things. You could make dust storms and things like that, you know, using these morphs here, and even use that as an idea and go into your vertex modeler and add morphs of your own. Expand width and shrink width are you know, basically just making this whole thing more expansive or more confined in the width area instead of globally the entire thing. And then, as we've seen, we have storm clouds 1 and storm clouds 2 is by default. Okay, now I'm going to go back and make that thing not visible again. And that's clouds in a nutshell. Now that we've gone through all of the things within the environmental controls, let's go ahead and use some content and make a scene.